The secretary, please take the roll of the board members present. And there is a change in some ads on the regular agenda. Mr. Josephson, do you want to add those? No?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Josephson, City of Dickinson Community Development Department. After we have the item number 1 in the regular agenda, there's a couple of more items we want to add for additional other business. One is going to be an update on the appeal to the sign ordinance, the appeal that you heard last month, and Ed Courton, Community Development Director, is going to give that. And then I wanted to have a discussion about, we've had a number of variances for accessory structures, especially some of the ones in the city, and just wanted to have a discussion with the board and see how they're, get some direction or get some feeling about those variances, if they want to see more of them, if you're looking at possible restrictions on it, just to get the issue out. Not asking for any decision, but just want to discuss the issue at this point.
Okay, thank you. The minutes of the March 10th meeting, are there any corrections or additions? I did see that. I think I was here on the 10th. I wasn't of March, but I was not here in February. So the minutes of the March meeting, when it says call to order, Scott Bullinger called the meeting to order, I would like that changed to Larry called the meeting to order. Okay. Other than that, any other corrections or additions?
Mr. Chairman, move to approve.
Move to approve by Scott. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Pat. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, nay. Carried without dissent. Regular agenda of April 14, to consider an increase of accessory structure area square footage at 12654 20th Avenue Southwest. And Scott, you want to come up to Blaine, do you want to come up to the mic and give us your name and address and everything for the record and tell us exactly what you want to do?
Okay. Blaine Decker, residing at 1265 20th Avenue Southwest, Dickinson, North Dakota. The reason I'm in front of you today, I would like a variance size. I'd like to build a bigger garage on my lot from where I think it's 1,700 square feet is what I'm allowed. And I would like to do a 2880 square foot garage. I have a concept rendering of the garage that I would like to build. Same color as my house, 16-foot sidewalls. I want to do a 4 or 5 garage doors to the south with a garage door on the east and the west side for access for my camper and boat. It's going to be roughly 50 feet away from my house and right behind my house, facing straight south or east to west. There are some buildings to the south, but them are my brothers, Scott's.
Okay.
And I have got the okay from all 3 adjoining neighbors, Mark Decker, my brother, Scott Decker, my brother, and Doug Hansen to the east. Has all had no problems with me doing this.
Okay, anything else, Blaine? Are there questions for Blaine? Comments?
I guess I got one more question.
Go ahead.
On my rendering and the drawing that I put to the city, I did draw it out as a 40 by 72. I have a question. If I would decide to go 42 by 70, would that be a problem? Go wider and shorter, or it all depends when I get my estimates back from my builders and stuff like that?
You're so close to the same square footage that
it is the same square, yeah. It's a little bit, yeah.
It isn't going to make any difference.
Okay.
Yes, yes, Steve Josephson, city county planner. As long as you don't exceed if the variance is granted, as long as you don't exceed that maximum square footage for an accessory structure, the garage still goes through the permitting process. So you'd work with whatever the standards are for that. But as long as the square footage stays the same, that's the question in front of the board today.
Blaine, will this be a working area? You got sewer, water,
No,
everything in it?
Just storage.
This storage?
Storage for tractors and skidster and boat, camper, and stuff like that. No drain, no heat, just garage doors and, oh, you know.
Okay, okay. A question for Mr. Josephson or Mr. Cruton. Does this have any effect on future development out there in this area?
Mr. Chairman, this area in here is already zoned rural residential. And one of the things we looked at was what was this in relation to there is some R1 zoning to the south of there, which a garage this size, if we were looking at it with R1 zoning, we would say, well, that's, you know, we might have a different recommendation regarding that. There's a couple of intervening lots, and with the lot being almost 2 acres in size, you know, and out in the ETZ, didn't really see that this would be an issue in terms of how this is going to affect any future rezonings in that area. We don't really have anything. I'm looking at our future land use map to see what we're looking at in that area for the future, and it looks, if you go to the further west of there, that's still, I think you're looking at agricultural, you know, future land use map. So any more residential in that area is probably going to stay the same. The RR will probably stay as is at this time.
Okay.
Not heard of it, really haven't seen in the ETZ any movements in these RR subdivisions to try to rezone them and replat them into smaller lots.
Okay.
Have not seen that happening.
Okay. Any questions or comments for Blaine? Hearing none, is there a motion to grant or deny the, yes, Steve, Mr. Josephson.
Give you the staff recommendation, Steve Josephson, City County Planner, and as the applicant stated, this is a request to increase the amount of accessory square footage to 2,380 square feet. In the RR zoning, you're allowed to, 1,200, and then for every, I believe it's and then there's an additional 500 for, for every acre over that, or I think it's every half acre over that. So in this case, 1,700 would be the max. And we looked at the area, we looked at the surrounding lot sizes and some of the accessory structures within that subdivision, and also the fact that this is located behind his existing house, and also that it's located to the north. There's intervening lots between that one and the residential one, the low-density zone neighborhood to the south of there. And the visual impacts would not appear to affect, to affect that, to have an impact on that neighborhood. And as the applicant had brought in signatures from the 3 adjacent property owners saying that they didn't object, staff is recommending approval.
Well, the other thing that I noticed was that it looked to me like on his garage he has a 12-foot, on his home he has a 12-foot sidewall with 10-foot doors on facing south and south.
South-southeast.
So it wouldn't be a whole lot more for the garage either, so it looks all right.
Didn't really see a visual impact or any sort of conflict with.
No. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Josephson. Anything, Mr. Cruton, do you have anything? Any other comments or questions? Sorry, I got ahead here. Now, is there a motion to deny or grant the variance?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the variance as requested.
Motion by Trevor to approve, second by Pat. Any further discussion? If not, Trevor,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye. I know it'll look nice. Get with it, Blaine.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's As we discussed for our added agenda, let's talk a little bit about the accessory structures. And
I'll go ahead and lead it off, let Steve Joseph lead off with the conversation, and I can chime in wherever it's needed.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Adjustment, I just wanted to raise this issue because in the last few months, we've had a number of these, come up, and especially with some of the city lots, which are a lot smaller than the lot that you heard about today. Just to review what our requirements are, once you get past the RR zoning, which allows you that extra 500, the extra 500 feet, based on acreage, and then there's a max to that, which is, I believe it can't then exceed 30% of the, I don't have it in front of me, of the entire square footage. Once you get into the other zoning districts, you have a maximum of 1,200 square feet for an accessory, accessory structure. Just to review on the amount of building coverage on those lots, with the R1, you're not supposed to, no more than 40% for building coverage, R2 more than 60%, and R3 70%. And some of that is put in there just because of the visual impacts of it, but also there's issues with stormwater runoff and why you don't want to have all this lot coverage and impervious surfaces and so on. We've seen over the last few months what you've seen there have been a number of ones with smaller lots where people have come in and requested additions to their accessory structures, and the leading reason is it's more convenience than anything else, which is somebody's got some vehicles, they want to expand the size of it, and we've looked at them on a case-by-case basis. In some of the cases, the lots have been larger and have had trees around them, where we thought, well, this is probably not going to be so much of an issue. But we've had a couple too where the lots have been small. The lots have been small, and you get to a point where sometimes the accessory structures start to reach, if not exceed, the square footage of the primary structure, in which case this is supposed to be accessory to it. I understand that people have vehicles and so on and they want to park them, but you start to undermine the purpose of having what the accessory structure is by expanding it. I just wanted to get a sense from the Board of Adjustment, and maybe Ed wants to add anything to this too, from the Board of Adjustment, about your sense when you get these variances come up before you.
I would agree with what Steve has stated thus far. For me, a concern is I want to make sure that if we're giving him advice, direction, and talked about past precedents, that's something that you feel comfortable with doing. I mean, we have kind of set a course about a year ago where if you come in and you talk to your neighbors, then if they're generally in agreement of it, then so be it. There's a good chance of you being approved that way. I just want to make sure that you feel comfortable with that. If that's something that obviously anybody could do anytime, even if you decided later on that we want to stick, strictly by the code, at least in the city limits. We have been very, very tight on how we've looked at it. We revised the code since I've been here to state that you limit it to 1,200 square feet, or if you have a bigger lot, you can increase that per every half acre. You can increase the square footage with respect to that, but I would just want to make sure before we have too many out there that you're comfortable with that policy. And if you are, maybe we change it from a variance and we do that as a special use permit. Variance is tough to be able to do because of the higher standard that you do have. In essence, they're creating that, so it's a difficult one to justify. Maybe we switch that out and say if you want to increase an accessory structure, you need to go through a special use permit. It's a little less stringent, and you still get the public to be there and comment and see if it's compatible and if it's in harmony with the established neighborhood. So I don't expect you to come up with an answer today, but just wanted to bring that up, with respect to that. So I don't know if you have, I'm here as Steve to be able to answer any questions you do have and hear your thoughts on that matter.
Right, just one thing I wanted to add too is I've worked in places where the rule of thumb tended to be with an accessory structure. If someone came in for a variance, you maybe looked at 10%. A 10% increase as being, as being reasonable. In my mind, the issue starts to be on these small lots when you start bumping up against that maximum building coverage and impervious surface limit, and where the accessory structure starts to look like and almost be the same size as the primary structure, on the property. So,
And with that, we start to deal with problems where you have renters and others that will buy a lot that will have a big accessory structure, and then there's a temptation of, well, yeah, I have this and that, and we start to deal with the issues potentially of running a business, or not necessarily the principal part of the business, but storage that's associated with a business starts to go into a residential area. So with that, I don't know if you have any particular thoughts on the matter, if you want to keep it as is, but we thought we'd just bring that up before we went too far down that road, just to make sure make sure you're comfortable as a board with respect to these.
Well, I think that the board has usually felt this or taken this as a case-by-case situation and everything, but I think in some cases it has gotten out of hand too, that, the accessory structure that was next to you, Pat, was definitally a problem.
Well, if it's next to Pat, I could care less, so
Yeah,
we'll
okay.
let that
Okay.
happen.
Thank you.
Okay.
Of course, never run out of gas in the Mojave Desert.
Let's not get real carried away here. But I think it has gotten to be a problem, and we should be thinking about it a little bit.
I think so too. Like Mr. Bars has said, we've taken these case by case, and probably down several years ago there were some mistakes that were made. Probably shouldn't have been allowed, but for the most part, I think that's probably the best way to handle it, is an individual lot, and to somewhat follow the percentages that are allowed.
I think one thing that we need to realize is that I know property owners like to have their stuff on their site, but there is options. We are getting more and more mini storage units being built, so they do have that ability to do it, as you do in other communities. But I also understand as well, you don't want to stick them there, because most of our mini storage, just about all of them, are not climate controlled. Therefore, a lot of the items that you may want to stick in your pictures, furniture, things of that nature, you would not want to stick in a standard dry mini storage unit, because if you deal with humidity and you deal with the cold, and that could adversely impact those particular items. We are starting to get some proposals for climate controlled ones that would allow them that ability to have it long-term wise if they wanted to do so. So we are having greater opportunities for the public and to store their items.
And yet, I think you have to kind of look at the other side of things too, that, we have rules and regulations for building and building codes area. And are we responsible for the individual that has 4 cars and 2 boats, and are we responsible to give those additional permits to do that? I don't know, it's just a question.
Right. I personally feel, no, we're not. I mean, I understand that we are in a very unique situation, no doubt about that. If we were in a very stable environment where homes were competitively, were priced where they should be long-term wise, not where they're at today, then you could easily make that call and say, well, you didn't have to buy your house on the west side. You could have bought a house on the east side that was a bigger lot, bigger house, in order to accommodate your additional household items, your toys that you may have. Today's environment, you're lucky to find a place to live, let alone try to accommodate everything you do have. But that being said, you do have the ability to be able to put it in storage. I think as a community, it's a balancing act. We know that we're in a very unique environment here. But we also want to be able, there's no reason why that we should be adversely impacting our environment any more than what we are naturally happening during this development cycle. I mean, all it takes is one bad neighbor on a block that has a lot of storage, like you're talking about, a boat and 4 cars, to adversely impact that entire neighborhood. And I know that for personal experience. I mean, it's unfortunate that when you look down your block, when you see that, that's all you see. You don't see all the good houses. You don't see the 90% of the houses that are compliant. You focus on that, but that's human nature. So it's a balancing act. I agree 100% with you.
And it's gotten, the lots are smaller, people are building big homes and very small lots.
And if it's a newer construction, we've allowed, if you recall right, when we went through that whole zoning code revision, it was 1,200 square feet for detached structures. A lot of the newer houses, if you look at them, are bigger houses, or 2,500 square feet, plus they have about 2,000 or 2,500 square feet of 3-car garage as well. So they're accommodating that in the newer ones. It's the older ones, it's the older sections with the 1-car garage, or maybe not even a garage at all, that become problematic in many ways. But I think it's something to think about, you know, if we want to continue on that path, or should we look at it and say, all right, within the city limits, within the extraterritorial zone that's, let's say, within the urban service area, we should have a stricter standard. When you're outside the urban service area, we're not looking at development occurring there necessarily for 20 years. We look at that as more county related. Okay, we have a different standard. And I think that's very fair to balance an urban standard to a county standard as well. Because in the county, you don't have the sensitivity, you normally have bigger lots, but we do have some smaller subdivisions located within that, but it's a different mentality and philosophy as well. And I think that we could separate those two if you like.
And I would add to that, certainly on, you know, like in this case today, where we had a lot that was a little under 2 acres, to absorb something like that, you know, it's a little easier to do than in some of these older subdivisions where we've been seeing, you know, the ones where you have lots that are 60 feet wide, and they're essentially they're all bumping up against each other. You know, it's certainly easier to absorb it on a larger piece of property than some of these the existing subdivisions in the city.
Mr. Chairman? I certainly agree that we need to take a look at these on a case-by-case basis, and I think the process has been working quite well. I mean, you know, we've been getting a lot of requests, but the one thing I see is possibly inconsistencies in our definition of hardship. Remember several years ago, we had, I'd say, a fairly liberal view of what constituted a hardship. About a year and a half ago, we tightened that up, and we went to a strict hardship definition. I think now we're lightening up a little bit if we, you know, as long as they get permission from the adjoining neighbors, we maybe take a little bit lighter view on the definition of hardship. So I think it wouldn't hurt to maybe look at tweaking the standards, maybe come up with a special use permit. I don't think it would hurt to at least start the discussion of that. That way we can maybe get back to a more consistent definition of what constitutes a hardship. I mean, even the hardship today. 6 months ago, we probably wouldn't have called that a hardship. We would have, but, and I agree entirely with what we did today. In my opinion, it was, I mean, the variance was justified.
And I would agree. The property where Blaine is at is not part of our urban service area, and I do not see that as probably being expanded into our city limits for a significant period of time. So that would be kind of the idea that I was talking about, a rural compared to urban, you know, design, or at least idea of looking at how you should address this particular issue. So, okay. If you like, I can move on to the next subject. Go ahead, Trent.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple comments. As far as, I think I'm okay with the case-by-case basis as long as it doesn't, you know, I don't think we have too many right now. So, I mean, we could do a special use for certain things, but I don't know if that's gonna be more work than just doing them on case-by-case basis or not. But as far as, I think, I've always had a question as the hardship thing. I know we've kind of changed back and forth, but certain things to some people are definitely a hardship. I mean, I could see somebody that doesn't have a garage with the snow and the way the city removal of the snow, the last 6 weeks might have been an extreme hardship to that person if they can't park on the street, or their car got towed, or they were snowed in for 3 days and missed work and lost their job. I mean, to me, that's a hardship if they can build a garage now. And then the other thing is technically it could be considered a hardship for somebody that has 2 acres to only have 1,700 square foot of garage when somebody has, 0.75 acres and can have 1,700 square foot of garage. I mean, I know it's not a hardship in they still have 0.75 acres, but you bought more land, you have more land, why can you not have more garage on it? And as far as the in-town stuff, I'm up in the air about that because the more garage people have, usually the more stuff they store in the garage and get off the street. So I'm in favor of taking everything off the street, especially in winter months that they can not park on the street. But if at a certain point, people seem to use it not as a residential storage as well. So I guess those are my 3 comments.
Thanks, Joe. Anyone else? Okay, let's move ahead then, and talk a little bit about the signage.
Just wanted to give you an update with respect to the last meeting where you supported my decision on the prohibition of billboards as part of our current sign ordinance. I want to thank you for that. Obviously, you don't make a decision with respect to personnel. You make it based upon the code. But just to give you an idea where that's at, we have been working with the Planning Commission. About a month ago, brought the first reading, actually 2 months ago, brought the first reading to City Council. City Council wanted to throw it back to, or bring it back to the Planning Commission to have them review it again. They didn't feel comfortable with the outright prohibition of billboards. They wanted to allow some latitude for that. So we've been working with the Planning Commission the last several months. I've proposed a draft in which Matt Colling is revising as we speak to be brought to the Planning Commission. This would allow billboards in our city, would allow additional billboards because it would fall along the industrial and commercial areas, would allow digital, would allow stagnant billboards, but it would have spacing requirements. It's kind of the other side of where I was going on the code. And my job as a staff planner is to hear where the direction from the commission, from the various boards want to do, and I'm providing an alternative ordinance, and we'll see where they want to go. I ultimately feel the Planning Commission will probably approve that, or at least recommend that to be submitted to the City Commission, and then ultimately let the City Commission decide. So most likely what will happen is that we'll have a revised code that will allow billboards. Then we're hoping if that's the case, then Dakota Outdoor Advertising should drop their appeal to the City Commission. It is scheduled for the 21st. If on the 16th, which is Wednesday, is when that's going to the Planning Commission, depending on how that goes, they may decide to continue it or drop their appeal based upon how that's all going. So that's kind of where we're at on that point. I think that, the old code, I feel very strongly. I don't take any of my decisions lightly when I know that they're going to be appealed. On that, I feel very strongly that the decision is well supported. If we go to court, I think we'll win. I think even Matt Colling agrees with that as well. But the question is, Planning Commission and City Commission, how they feel comfortable with it. And they are looking at trying to find a way to get some of the older signs up to higher standard and then potentially allow new ones as well. So the appeal was based upon our current one, which prohibited it. The new one may allow it, and then we'll see where all the chips go at that point. So I've done my job, and I will let the decision makers ultimately make their decision as well. So. Okay. Thank you very much.
Anything else? Nothing? Okay. We have a vote to adjourn.
Move.